Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Captain Lisa Batchelor. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. And during this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting in 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Ralph William Metcalfe. Ralph Metcalfe was born on the 25th of September 1918 to Ralph and Jessie Metcalfe. Born in the Sydney suburb of Granville, he spent a considerable part of his childhood in and around Kiama, where most of his brothers and sisters were born. During this time, his father worked on the New State Quarry. At least one of his siblings, a sister called Jessie, died in infancy and was buried in North Kiama. Around 1930, the family moved to Maryland near Parramatta, and Ralph went to work for the Plashet Pastoral Company as a dairy farmer. He was described as a young man of outstanding character and had a large circle of friends, one of whom became his fiancée, a Miss B. Killen of Jerry's Plains. Ralph Metcalfe enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force in June of 1940. He was posted to the 4th Battalion in Newcastle and later in the year was sent to Tamworth to continue his infantry training. He did not leave Australia for active service overseas until April of 1941, when he was sent to the Middle East. In mid-June, Private Metcalfe was marched out to the 2nd 1st Battalion, which had fought at Bardia and Tobruk before being sent to Greece and Crete, where the majority of its men were captured. Metcalfe was part of the cadre of new recruits that rebuilt the battalion in Palestine. He remained with the newly built formation as it manned defensive positions in northern Syria before departing by sea in March of 1942. The 2nd 1st Battalion was initially destined for Australia, but it was diverted to Sri Lanka, then known as Ceylon, due to fears of an imminent Japanese invasion. After several months of manning defensive positions there, it became clear that the invasion was not going to come, so the battalion returned to Australia. Private Metcalfe was granted disembarkation leave after arriving back in Australia in August of 1942. Just a few weeks later, he left Australia again, this time for New Guinea. The 2nd 1st Battalion arrived at Port Moresby on the 22nd of September 1942 and began training immediately. 5 days later, it was determined that the battalion would form the vanguard of a force moving eastwards along the Kokoda track. Rain fell during their first march to Sam's Corner, and from the outset, the going was hard. After several days at Jarrawea, the battalion moved on up to the Arabaya Range, passing the graves of Australian soldiers marked, killed in action. The war diary notes that the journey became one long climb, which appeared unending. Steps have been cut along the path, but the going is very arduous and slow. On the 16th of October, word was received that the 33rd Battalion had been pushed back by the Japanese north of Eora Creek. The 2nd 1st began aggressively patrolling in search of the enemy. 3 days later, they moved forward to relieve the Australians holding Templeton's Crossing against the Japanese advance. On the 22nd of October 1942, after a quiet night, parts of the 2nd 1st moved towards Eora Creek village to try and determine the enemy's positions. It was soon established that the enemy were in the village in some force. Although the Australian attack stalled in the daylight, as night fell, the battalion was ordered to press on, and fierce fighting continued through the following day. At some point on the 23rd of October 1942, Private Ralph Metcalfe was killed in action. It is not clear whether he was one of 2 men killed by mortar fire in the morning, or if he was part of the heavy casualties sustained by Delta Company as they attempted to skirt around the enemy positions. Despite the desperate situation, his body was carefully buried by his comrades. After the war, it was brought down from the heights, and today, Private Ralph Metcalfe lies in the Bamana War Cemetery in Port Moresby, under the words, "His duty nobly done." He was 24 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Ralph William Metcalfe, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode, the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.